to Great Britain. Nobody has been following the royal family's role in this more closely than Tom Sykes. Tom, what are your sources telling you about how this week has gone for the royal family?
Hi, Joanna. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's been an extraordinary week for the royals. When I first started doing royal reporting many years ago, someone told me it's either feast or famine, and it's definitely been feast the last 2 weeks. There's been so much going on with Harry over last week, and then this week, the state visit. Look, they're delighted. They think it went really well. There've been plenty of criticisms. There's always loads of criticism of people saying, oh, they shouldn't be doing this, they shouldn't be hosting these people. And, I have to say, I think that it definitely was embarrassing, the extent to which they rolled out, the red carpet, the gold carpet, whatever you want to call it, carpet. 1,500 troops, sort of entirely made up ceremony where he was paraded in gilt carriages through Windsor Great Park. I mean, very interesting, of course. The whole point of a procession, a ceremonial procession, normally is that you are seen by the people. This was conducted behind closed doors, with the only people allowed to watch soldiers who, could presumably be relied on not to shout and not to boo and hiss. But I mean, look, fundamentally, it went really well. And I thought it was capped, actually, by the incredible moment, that banquet last night. I mean, it was extraordinary. The images were amazing. Kate looked absolutely fabulous in that Philippa Lepley gown, which I'm sure you were quick to identify, Joanna. I thought Charles looked pretty good, actually. I thought he looked pretty spry. He's got cancer. He can look very tired. Sometimes he can look a bit sort of ragged, the appearance, the features and all of that. I thought he looked pretty good, pretty spry. I think he looked like he was enjoying himself. I think they'll consider it, a job well done. And I think they'll be delighted. Marine One has just lifted off from Chequers, and I think everybody will be delighted that the man's gone home.
A huge exhalation of relief, I would think, that it's gone off as smoothly as it has. But can we just talk about some of the photos that were in your Royalist newsletter this week, which took on the quality of 17th century paintings? I mean, the National Portrait Gallery in Britain, which is one of Britain's best galleries, has remarkable portraits of kings and monarchs and queens over the years. And I thought several of the photos you used should immediately go into the National Portrait Gallery. They were of that quality, and they showed a furious-looking Prince William, a furious-looking Prince Andrew, and a worried-looking Kate, and a slightly oblivious King Charles, talking at one point to I think it was the Archbishop or the Catholic Bishop of London, who looked very oleaginous, who looked like he was doing everything he could to make sure that the royal family were having a good time, which I guess he should do. But can you tell us about the drama that was going on before Donald Trump arrived?
Yeah, so it was an extraordinary moment. So on Tuesday, literally hours before Trump touched down, there was a funeral for the Duchess of Kent, who's sort of little known royal, very, very much liked, sort of retreated from royal life, but was sort of liked basically because of that, not a very controversial figure. So ironic that her funeral has become a scene of this controversy because Andrew showed up. Now, I don't know about you, but I thought that the idea was to keep Andrew as far away from the royal family as possible. But of course, and that is the idea. And of course, what he has figured out, it seems to me, is that there are some events where he can still insert himself into the family dynamic, get proximity to the family, keep his, self-importance alive. And that's exactly what he did. He showed up at this funeral on Friday with Fergie and was given a seat directly behind William and Kate.
Which is very odd planning. I mean, who on earth put him there? Because can we just remind people why Prince Andrew is persona non grata within the Windsors now?
Yeah, so of course it all comes back to Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew accused of having sex with Virginia Giuffre, Jeffrey Epstein trafficking victim who subsequently took her own life. Andrew, of course, famously, sorry?
He had a huge settlement. Didn't the Queen, his mother, pay off a $12 million settlement?
Yeah. Exactly. And we were told at the time this was to avoid any trial overshadowing the celebrations for the Platinum Jubilee. And then, of course, my friend and yours, Andrew Loney's book came out. And I think we saw the real reason why they didn't want any of this stuff tested in court. So since then, he has been largely excluded from any formal royal role. But they've reached this sort of uncomfortable accommodation where they're like, well, he's not part of the working royal family, but he's still a member of the blood family, so he can show up at family events. And he somehow managed to get himself invited to this funeral. I think the conspiracy theory is that Charles's people permitted him to come and placed him exactly in that place to deliver a reprimand to William, who's been very aggressively opposed to his father meeting Prince Harry last week, and thinks that Charles, in allowing Andrew back into the fold, has been incredibly weak, and fears that he's making the same mistake with Harry and is being very weak. And William's friends have been very openly telling me this. Lots of media have been told this. The British media have been careful not to report it too much. We're a bit more free, being in the US, to be able to cover it. So we're telling more of the story. Though it is strangely starting to emerge in the UK media, particularly after Tina Brown, another mutual friend of ours, wrote about the hostility between Charles and William. So you're in this look, I met somebody, a courtier once said to me, the thing you have to understand about the royal family is that they all hate each other. They were joking and they were exaggerating a little bit. But they are extremely competitive family because everything plays out in public. When one is up, one is down. What's the best thing to ever happen to William and Kate? Harry and Meghan, behaving appallingly, because by reflection, everything they do looks fantastic. They look, the fragrant Princess Catherine, etc., etc., etc. So everything has to be understood in terms of the family dynamics. But of course, there's a whole extra family dynamic now because King Charles is dying before our eyes. And that is creating a whole nother dynamic because he very unwisely told everybody that he had cancer. Well, actually, it was a mistake. They didn't really plan to say he had cancer. Initially, they planned just to say he was having this minor prostate procedure and to show how modern and transparent he was. Then, of course, the cancer was discovered, and by that time, too many people knew. So by the time Charles has sort of pre-announced his own death, all of the power is drifting over to William. And that's why William is really asserting himself and really saying, I don't want you seeing Harry. I don't want you seeing Andrew. I don't want you doing this. I'm the heir. You can't leave me a settlement that I can't live with. And the conspiracy theory is that Charles placed Andrew, or more to the point, Clive Alderton, who is Charles's private secretary, placed Andrew there to deliver a reprimand, a check to William's ambition, which I find very convincing, actually, because nothing happens in royal choreography by accident. I mean, that is the one thing to remember. Somebody knew that Andrew was going to be in the same photograph as William and Kate. Somebody knew it, and somebody okayed it.
Well, the photographs are absolutely extraordinary. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to show the photographs. This is a live, so I don't know if we are. But Andrew's face is remarkable. I mean, you can see on this one, and look at Kate's face here, because Kate knows for William, this is awful. And I have some sympathy with the king here in terms of wanting to make good as you get older certainly with your younger son, and also with your brother. I mean, he's someone he grew up with. No one wants to fall out with their kids. So I can understand and rather applaud King Charles's human instinct to want to make good. Who knows how long he's got, but that does actually seem rather a sort of warming thing to do, isn't it?
I think it is, but I think from an institutional point of view, it makes the institution look weak because people are doing things and people are getting away with things. And what I think is really interesting is I think if you look back at the reign of Queen Elizabeth, really when the discipline really started to slip was when Philip died. And actually, Philip ruled the family with a rod of iron. And I tell you, you wouldn't have been able to get around with messing around, the way these guys are when Philip was in control. And I did notice after Philip died, things started to slip. People started to do milk deals with the Chinese government. They started to do this. They started to do that. None of which they would have dared to do while Philip was around to ball them out. And it just seems to me that the discipline has slipped and slipped and slipped. And now Charles just appears incredibly weak. That's the problem. And so everybody's doing what they want. And you've got to remember, right, this is not like for Charles and his direct heir to be very publicly at massive loggerheads about central policy of the British family, i.e., do we acknowledge Andrew and do we acknowledge Harry, is a really big deal. Like this is not how, sensible any business, even if you have a disagreement behind closed doors, you don't display that pathology out in the public.
All right, so I've got one more question before we bring in Hugh Dougherty, but I wanted you to know, what are people saying that Princess Kate, who I thought looked sensational last night, what was she talking about to Donald Trump as they sat next to each other at dinner? I just can't imagine the conversation. Maybe they talked about St Andrews, Scotland. What did they talk about, Tom? What do you hear?
Well, as far as I can tell, he just kept telling her how beautiful she was and how radiant she was, and she looked mildly. She smiled broadly, I think, as she was told these marvelous blandishments by the President of the United States. But it's hard to imagine. But I do think, honestly, that they come across a lot of people, and I think they're able to keep the conversation going for 45 minutes with Donald Trump. And of course, lots of people, including Michael Wolff, will tell you actually Donald Trump's quite a good conversationalist when he gets going.
All right, one final question, and I promise, Hughie, I'm gonna let you fire questions at Tom. What was the royal family's reaction to the film that was projected on the side of Windsor Castle, which included Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein, and Donald Trump?
Well, I think officially silence, but I think that but the reality is that it reinforces William's argument, which is that Andrew needs to be cut off completely, and he needs to never be seen with a member of the royal family ever again as long as he lives. And there's lots of theories of why Charles hasn't cut off, because actually Charles had a very, very bad relationship with him 15 years ago. They all fell out when Charles did his big slimming down of the monarchy and kicked out his kids, who were Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice. So I do find it slightly mystifying why this problem was kind of solved by the late Queen Elizabeth, who, took the decision to kick him out and cut him off, and he wasn't invited to Christmas. When the Queen was alive, he was not invited to Christmas at Sandringham. He didn't get to go to church. So I'm slightly mystified of why Charles has allowed Andrew back in. I think it's partly a kind of natural Christian tendency within him, and I mean that in the broadest sense, but also in the specific sense. And I think also he was perhaps wrongly under the impression that it was important for him to look like a conciliator, to look like a convener, when I think actually, as a monarch, the most important thing you actually need to look is strong and decisive. And it all looks is very confused now. Like people like me, I understand that Andrew's part of the work family, but not part of the working family. But to the other 50 billion people around the world on Facebook who are getting their news on social media, it's not clear. Andrew is a prince as far as they're concerned, and he seems to have had a relationship with the world's most famous paedophile. So, it's not great.
And the woman that introduced them, or I don't know if she did introduce them, but certainly the woman that appeared in the very famous photo of him with his arm around Virginia History is in an American prison serving 20 years for sex trafficking. It's Ghislaine Maxwell. Hugh.
Well, Joanna, thank you for convening us. This is amazing. It's like a royal gathering. Tom is in his throne. We should get you a throne.
I would like a throne.
I think
would
that- I
like
think
a
that would
throne.
be the right
I
thing.
want a version of Tom's throne.
I want to say a big shout out to all our members who are watching. I want to say a big shout out to Jean Tarler, who's just joined as a new member. Welcome, Jean.
Yes, thank you, Jean. You're getting comments on your screen. I'm not getting them on mine, which is why I haven't referred to them. But
That's because I'm a mere courtier, and the idea is that I should just be, as a true royal, you should just be, fed them with your, I don't know, with your caviar. What I think everybody's wanting to talk about here is the Trump factor. What do the royal family think of Trump? And you were pointing out, Tom, that when Kate was sitting beside Trump for 45 minutes, he is an avid conversation. He's a good conversationalist in closed doors. But he's also somebody that just says the same things. And it's quite easy to practice, I would imagine, to be Kate Middleton in that scenario, because you just watch Trump press conference and you know all his talking points. The big thing I think everybody was observing is the physicality of this. And Tom, you rightly said the king looked pretty good, but kind of weirdly, Trump seemed diminished. And one of the big observations of the week was that Prince William was beside Trump, and we got a sight of Trump, who claims to be 6'2", besides someone who really is 6'3". How did that play? How does that play in the royal family that they may not have made Trump look that good? Or do they care? Or do they think, well, he's on Marine One and he's off home, and we don't have to look at that again for a while?
Well, I think, of course, I think the thing to remember is that this is really nothing to do with the king or the queen's personal wishes. They're asked to do these things by the government. They agree to do them. They show up. They put their best foot forward, and in return, they get a massive amount of money from the thing called the Crown Estate. Millions and millions of pounds, and they get free food. So what's not to like?
Sabatines, chicken.
They get free delicious.
They get all the coronation chicken that they could dream of. But I think I loved the late Queen Elizabeth's comment about meeting Trump, which was in Craig Brown. Craig Brown's a very funny British writer who wrote a book called A Voyage Around Her Majesty, or so, after she died. And she said that she was very annoyed when she met Trump, because he kept looking over her shoulder like he was looking for somebody more interesting. And then she saw Melania, and she apparently turned to one of her portraits and said, "Well, she is very beautiful. I suppose they must have some kind of arrangement," which is a marvelous analysis.
That's one thing we should talk about is the arrangement that the royals put on for Trump and Melania. As we understand it, they got separate suites. How does that work, Tom? How big is this castle?
I mean, I don't think it would have raised an eyebrow in Windsor. I mean, Charles and Camilla have their own houses. The Queen and Prince Philip slept in Jack and Jill bedrooms with a shared bathroom. And I have to say, if I was going to Windsor Castle, getting off a transatlantic flight, I would definitely ask for my own bedroom so that I could get a good night's sleep before being paraded through, bathed in gold gilt and paraded through Windsor Great Park. But I think that, I think that overall, like, I felt like pretty embarrassed by the kind of, everything being laid on. I just thought it was kind of, I don't know. I feel like, it's fine. We've got to have a functional relationship, right, with our, this really important ally. But do we really have to just, spend all this time and money and just sucking up to this guy, just literally greasing up to this one man's ego? It just felt kind of, it felt kind of icky, didn't it? The whole thing felt a bit icky, and it felt very transactional, and it felt very like, I'll tell you what, we'll let you pretend to be king for a day, and will you give us 1% off our tariffs? I mean, like, and at the end of the day, look, it's realpolitik, and fair enough. If they get 1% off the tariffs, that's obviously worth whatever you could spend in, horses, hooves, clopping around Windsor Castle. But it did just feel it felt a bit gross. And, I hated the way Trump was saying, I'm the only person to have been invited twice. I'm so special. Nobody's ever going to get this again. It was just like, oh my God. The whole world is just feeding this man's delusion that he's amazing. And in fact, he's just a sort of huckster who's I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to get into the politics because I'm not like, I just know what I see, and to me, it just felt a bit icky.
We should point out, by the way, Trump at this banquet suggested that he was the first American president to be invited to Windsor, and that is obviously wrong. Indeed, the late Queen Elizabeth took Ronald Reagan horse riding round Windsor Great Park, where Trump only got taken round in a carriage. So,
and I think she drove. Did she not pick up Obama in her Range Rover?
Yes.
Herself. They went and picked up and drove them back up.
And both of those are incredibly famous pictures. And one thing we know about Donald Trump is that he watches a lot of television, and he was definitely watching at the time. And we also know that his mother, who was alive during the Ronald Reagan thing, obsessed by the royal family because she, like me, was Scottish. And one of the, we've seen the hype. How do the royals deal with this sort of hype man, this, all-American presence? Because one of the things that you were pointing out in one of your excellent commentaries on your Substack, and everybody should subscribe to the Royalist. Joanna, you said that. I just want to double up on that. But one of the things you pointed out was that the royals aren't really into a lot of the show and the display as part of the job, but behind closed doors, they're not really into that. How do they react to somebody that really is into that?
Well, I think that they're incredibly, they are ultimately political figures, they're raised to be political. So I think it's all about, everybody knew what the job was for these 2 days or 3 days. Now I'm just seeing the president's en route to Stansted Airport. He's nearly gone, so we can nearly breathe a sigh of relief. But the mission was very simple. The mission was make Trump feel as special as he needs to feel to favour us and to be our friend and to give us a break on these trade deals and this kind of stuff. And I have to say that I think that they've done a really good job. I mean, Trump, he looked absolutely mad the way he was smiling so much. I mean, the man was wreathed in smiles with a sort of, he just looked absolutely, he looked like he was in heaven. He looked like he was in paradise.
Well, I think if you haven't experienced one of those events too, I remember actually being at the state visit for Lech Wałęsa, the Polish president, and the Queen driving him, or not driving, the Queen riding around Windsor with him in the gold carriage was an extraordinary sight to behold. If you actually haven't seen it up close, it's surprisingly moving and effective. It's a bit like a sort of children's fairy tale coming to light, because you can't believe horses still pull these carriages. The gold carriage, as we know, has recently been refurbished. I'm sure Donald Trump is going to come back and demand his own gold carriage. We see his fascination with the ballroom at the White House. He's tearing down the East Wing, where traditionally the First Lady would sit and do her work from, to replace it with a ballroom. And now he's seen what a state banquet really looks like when Windsor Castle pulls out all the stops. It was an incredible table.
Yeah.
I'm still fascinated by what on earth Tiffany Trump and Cook talked about. Perhaps she was asking him for tips on her cell phone. I know I would like his tips on my cell phone, all those shortcut things. What on earth were they talking about?
Tom, one comment that people are making in the chat, and thank you for everybody who's commented.
It's so interesting, the comments. We've got someone here who's saying her grandfather was at school with King Charles at Gordonston.
Yes. And one comment is, did King Charles give Trump the golden carriage ride he wanted? And there are two aspects to that. But one is, can you just explain, how did this all come about, right? Does the king himself decide on these things? Or is somebody, what's the way in which you end up in a golden carriage with King Charles?
So state visits are in the gift of the British government, the Foreign Office. They say, we need to get this guy over. We need to impress him and grease up to him. And then the king writes a private letter. Now, what happened this time was really, really weird, because Trump being Trump, he opened the letter live on camera in the White House. So for the first time ever, we got to see the letter. And what's really interesting is that the letter said, I'd love it when you're in Scotland in the autumn if you'd come to Balmoral and have tea with me and my wife, and we could talk about plans for a state visit. And Trump apparently, I think with half an eye on the King's health, decided that he didn't want to wait, and B, didn't want the big golden carriage moment to be overshadowed by an informal kind of handshake at Turnberry Golf Course or whatever. So we know a bit more about the mechanics of this state visit than we usually do. But yeah, fundamentally, it's a government-to-government thing disguised as a kind of personal thing.
I mean, I think that was all masterminded, wasn't it? Certainly, according to Michael Wolff, the letter was masterminded from the King to Donald Trump, presented with great flourish and ceremony by Keir Starmer while he was in the Oval Office at the White House. And of course, it was masterminded by the then British ambassador, Peter Mandelson, who's been forced the week before this famous state visit, the second state visit, very unusual for an American president or any head of state to have two visits with the royal family. And of course, Peter Mandelson got fired over his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. So did that overshadow things at all?
I've always felt the description of Peter Mandelson as one of the great mysterious operators of the dark arts, this masterful genius. It's completely incompatible with the reality. I mean, the man's been fired from, I don't know, you'll know better than me. I mean, how many times has he been fired from government, Hugh?
Now three times.
Got to be more than that.
The first time for taking a loan from someone who's investigating at the DTO. The second time for trying to hustle a passport.
It's only the third time. I thought it was way up to 4 or 5 by now.
It feels like so many more to anybody who's British. But
well, he's such a fascinating character, Peter Mandelson, and clearly very talented, very for getting Labour elected. You know, Tony Blair's great ally, getting a new Labour elected first time in 1997. But this has been a blow, surely, for the visit. Certainly a blow for Obama.
I mean, it's been really, really awkward for the visit. And Trump was asked about it in the press conference today. Beth Vigby from Sky News said to him, talk about the elephant. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Peter Mandelson. And Trump said, I have no idea who you're talking about. No idea who you're talking about.
Again, classic Trump denial.
This is the most Trumpy way to deny something. I never knew him. I never met him. I can't remember him. And there is no way, obviously, there's no rational way that you cannot remember the person that you met to talk about going to meet the king, and probably somebody who said, well, we could probably sort you out with a golden carriage while you're there.
So, I mean, literally, there was a press conference they did together where Peter Mandelson is standing next to Donald Trump behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office.
And I don't know how many times Trump has done this. It's more than a handful. It's maybe dozens of times that he's denied knowing someone, and the evidence is stark and obvious, and it's kind of absurd. But what it does speak to is the fear that Epstein engages in Trump, and talking about Epstein is difficult. And Tom, we were talking when we started this live, and for people who are joining us, thank you for joining us. We were talking about the projection onto the biggest tower on Windsor Castle of video footage of literally a small documentary movie about Trump and Epstein, and it featured the Daily Beast's Michael Wolff, whose Inside Trump's Head podcast has detailed the craziness of this royal visit brilliantly, and I urge people to go back and listen and then subscribe tonight for more. But how on earth, what did, presumably Trump wanted some explanation of how this happened, and how does everybody stop? How did people manage not to say Epstein? How protected was Trump, in fact, from this?
Is Tom still with us?
Tom is still with us. He is on his throne, waiting to give us his thoughts as we watch.
Tom, are you still there? Has Tom got cut off? I got a sort of loud bleep in my ear, and I wondered if that was Tom leaving.
Have we been censored, Joanna?
We might have been censored.
Is the First Amendment a problem?
Yeah. Tom, are you still there?
I am still here. I was just getting a little clip of the projection on the
Oh,
slide.
brilliant!
And
Here
this-
we go. That's very impressive.
So I'm not sure whether it's
Please.
intentional, but that's why I'm looking slightly blankly.
So just to talk about this a bit more, this is, Tom, I think I'm right in saying the biggest of all the towers at Windsor. It's the one you can see most from the road, or from Windsor itself. And what's pretty amazing is that the whole setup for this visit was done by somebody who had to resign because he was a friend of Peter Mandelson, and the person that's coming is a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. The person that's coming is a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. And how did the British government negotiate this? How did they manage to avoid Epstein coming up more? Tom.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Hugh. I'm going to have to let you guys take over here because there's something going wrong on my back end here. So I'm just going to sit quietly.
Well, Tom, don't worry. You managed to show us the video again, and several people are pointing out that we referred to Prince Charles when we meant King Charles. And you're quite right, Brackbass. My only defence is that he was in an apprenticeship for 74 years before he got the job, and we got so used to calling him Prince Charles growing up there that he'll always be Prince Charles to me. That's not true. I actually think he's been a rather effective king.
Yeah, and I think Tina Brown who has been a guest on the Daily Beast
and
podcast.
A brilliant writer of
brilliant
the
writer,
royal family.
I mean, the inspirational founder of the Daily Beast, of course, but particularly insightful writer on the royal family, and one who is very willing, or is a very fair-minded critic of the royal family, and has been willing, as Tom was saying earlier in the stream, to go further in public than other people have about exposing their inconsistencies and their difficulties, and in this case, the relationship between Charles and William not being perfect. She is giving King Charles, I almost said Prince Charles, she is giving King Charles high marks for his handling of being monarch. And I think that might be the big takeaway from this, Tom, right? That
yeah.
Trump
I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, I think, yeah, I think he's done the job, I think, competently, but I think that the big mistake that he made, unfortunately, was this mistake about saying that he had cancer, and it's just weakened him hugely, because it's like if you're at the end of your second term as president, it's like there's no point, that if you've got a mortgage to pay and you've got school fees to pay, as a courtier, you start thinking about what's coming next, and
it's a lame duck. It's a sort of lame duck. They call it here a lame duck presidency, but a lame duck monarchy in a way. And of course, you see William limbering up to take over.
Yeah.
I actually thought, in terms of the physicality, I was surprised that Kate Middleton Princess Kate was so much taller than Melania. We know Melania was a model, and
so Melania's height officially has been said to be 5'11". Kate is known right in saying, Tom, is 5'9", I believe.
I think so, yeah.
Well, he towered over her when they met this morning in the park, both going off to meet the scouts and looking very autumnal. Well, it's
very autumnal in their Ralph Lauren.
Yeah, they were both wearing matching Ralph Lauren. Well, Tom, we should let you go. I think you're about to go and interview Prince Andrew's biographer, Andrew Loney, who was on the Daily Beast podcast a couple of months ago with shocking revelations about Prince Andrew's private life, which again has made clear that he's shunned once more from the royal family.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much.
Well, Tom, we'll look forward to having you back soon. And congratulations on the success of The Royalist. Anybody interested in the royal family should sign up to your Substack.
Thank you. I'm going to attempt to elegantly press the leave button, but apologies.
Yeah, we've no idea if we'll be able to do it, but thank you very much, everybody, for writing in with your comments. They've only just started pouring into my feed, but next time we do a YouTube live, I will be much more on the ball. And Hugh, you were on the ball from the beginning.
Well, I just want to say a couple of things to wrap up. This was an amazing drama, an amazing spectacle playing out in public. And what's obvious was that Trump was really into it. And
he's a performer. He's a brilliant performer.
And he also the press conference that closed out this visit was not with a member of the royal family. It was with Keir Starmer, who is the British Prime Minister, who is not, if we're honest, a big figure on the world stage. He's not a performer.
Well, he doesn't have riz.
Yeah.
He doesn't have riz, whereas Trump, like him or love him, like him or hate him, does have performance energy.
Yeah, and Trump was actually very restrained at this press conference, and he even, he mumbled answers to get them back to Keir Starmer, and not when he finally addressed Epstein and Mandelson, he said, "Well, I don't know, I can't remember him," and that was it. And he did not. There were no meltdowns, there were no tirades. It was not quite what we're used to with Trump, and that seems to be the royal effect here. That there is something bigger. There's something bigger and better than being president, and he saw it.
I think it'll be good for the ballroom at the White House. I think it will have some tasteful Windsor Castle touches to it, and I think he'll add even more gold to his office, the Oval Office. Famously restrained. I mean, the difference between Windsor Castle and the grandiosity that we experienced over the last couple of days, and the deliberate underplaying of the decor at the White House. It's supposed to be the people's house, a humble place to go. I'm sure we're going to see it jazzed up even more.
We almost certainly. Is there going to be a suit of armour? Are there going to be some more swords? I just want to say to everybody who's watching, apologies to those of you who do not get my accent. I've been working on it, and I think I'm stuck with it.
Hugh is from Scotland. For those of you who don't know,
for
Hugh
those
is from
not
Scotland.
following, I'm originally from Scotland. 12 years in New York has not diminished this, and 10 years in London as well. But this drama, Joanna, that's kind of what we live for. And what are we going to see next from Trump is going to be the big question. He's coming back, and he is going to a very different drama, and that's going to be the funeral of Charlie Kirk, and a very different spectacle, but one that is probably going to be even more consequential than this visit.
And he's been out of the country for the Kash Patel hearings, which have really been about Jeffrey Epstein and, of course, Kash Patel's role as head of the FBI.
A lot of Jeffrey Epstein to discuss.
A lot of Jeffrey Epstein to discuss. Tom Sykes, thank you very much. We love your raffia throne, and we will be doing more YouTube lives, especially when I figured out how to get the comments at the beginning. All right, we have a newsroom to run.
Thank you for having me, Joanna.
What fun. And fun.